Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Calvary Episcopal Church. Hello, fabulous folks. Hello. Hello. I'm Catherine Bush. Welcome to the Great Hall Conversation this morning. We're going to be reflecting this morning, for those of you who are in the room and those of you who are watching online, on the experience that two of our groups here had over the past year with Sacred Ground. Sacred Ground is, come on, scooch on in, yeah. Sacred Ground is the Episcopal Church's curriculum that has been built and added to and collaborated with by a whole lot of people over the last several years as an offering to our communities to do the deeper work of anti-racism. When Stephanie Spellers was here for LPS a year ago, she's one of the leaders and authors and contributors to that, and certainly a spokesperson for launching these groups. And our friends at Grace St. Luke's Episcopal Church, just over there in Midtown, were a model for us. They were the first Memphis churches to do the Sacred Ground circles. They had two groups a year ago out, and we met with some of their leaders to learn from their experiences, and they were very generous in sharing what worked and how they were moved by it, and have been a resource to some of our folks in ongoing ways. And this past fall, we launched two Sacred Ground circles, ably led by some vestry leadership, participated in by some of our clergy, and this astounding group of folks up here, plus a few others who couldn't be with us this morning. This is, it's not quite a year long. How many sessions altogether? 11 sessions, but you can't do it all in a row. You have to spread it out because the work is so deep, and there's a lot of homework to do, and there's films to watch and things to read. So it took the better part of a school year curriculum to go through this journey. So y'all started in September and just wrapped up in March, for late February, early March for the most part. And we wanted to reflect and hear a little bit about their experiences. So I'm going to start with our leaders. So Anna Catherine and Elizabeth and Shannon and John Owen, who couldn't be with us today, he's traveling, are all on either currently or were on vestry when this opportunity kind of bubbled up, and saw it as really an extension of their role as leaders at Calvary, and had their own personal interest in taking this on. So I'd love for the three of y'all who are here this morning to talk a little bit about what drew you to the conversation, why you think it's important for Calvary, how it's a part of your role as leaders here. Anything you want to say about that?
Hi, everybody. I'm Anna Catherine Word. I was on the vestry last year as I was the vestry warden. And when this opportunity came up, the vestry really saw it as a priority for Calvary, and we made it one of our strategic goals for the vestry to launch this Sacred Ground initiative. So we did a lot of pre-work. We talked with Catherine. We listened to Stephanie Spellers. We met with the folks at GSL, as Catherine mentioned, to see how their experiences had been. And then we launched in September with a really great group of folks. For me, it was important because I believe that Calvary has a moral imperative to do this work with our history. I think it's really critical that we do the hard work, that we reflect on our history here in Memphis, what happened on this property. But Sacred Ground goes even deeper than that and really looks into a lot of the histories and the struggles of people of color throughout the history of our nation. And as a mother, that was also really important to me because I'm raising two white children, and I want them to understand that they have a privilege that comes from their skin color that others don't have. And I want to be able to teach them about other histories and other challenges that people have experienced in the right ways. So that's why I chose to co-facilitate Sacred Ground with the wonderful Elizabeth Crosby. And I'll hand it over to Elizabeth.
Thanks, Anna Catherine. I thoroughly enjoyed being a part of this, and I agree that it is a moral imperative for us to reflect on these issues, to learn about them. I'm really excited to get to the acting part in our group, and I'm sure your group talked about that as well, that after a year of reflecting together, that we're ready to kind of move past the sort of small group, small room that was really important to grounding us, but it also gave us the space and the conversation to think about what next. And I think we all walked in already thinking about what next, but the course was really important in slowing us down, so that we really learned more than you think you know a lot and you don't. And I'll just leave it there for that. There's so much good to say about it, and I'm so glad that we're doing this.
And hey, everybody, I'm Shannon Tucker. And so when you're immersed in sacred ground, it's easy just to have a conversation with other people who have been immersed in sacred ground. But people who haven't been in sacred ground, it's kind of hard to describe the feelings around it. So I got involved. I was on the vestry. I'm still on the vestry. And I was on the vestry last year when we talked about this. And my sister was it was in one of the first groups at Grace St. Luke's that did it, and I was jealous. Like, what are you doing over there that we're not doing at Calvary? And I would hear her come back, and actually what I would hear her say is that, oh my gosh, I have to do my sacred ground. It's like tomorrow I'm meeting, and like that's how I usually do work. Like there's no inspiration like the deadline, like reading everything the day before, and getting immersed in some stuff that I hadn't learned in my very white life. And so about the time, it was in like the summer of 2020, right after the murder of George Floyd, my company that I work for in the world wanted to do something. And so I helped facilitate something for really the firm to talk about some of similar to sacred ground issues. And it was so moving to me. We did it for 21 weeks at my company. And it wasn't really sacred ground, but it was kind of like sacred ground. And when I saw this opportunity, I was like, oh, something that is actually prepared by the church to talk about some stuff that we really never learned, like growing up. Like, and that was, I think we're going to talk about that at some point too. That, like the part of it that was like shocking to me is that, I'm 54 years old, and I learned stuff like every assignment, I learned stuff that I didn't know before about our own history, about stuff that we just didn't get taught. So, yeah, that's why I'm still passionate about it. I think everybody should be involved in it, should learn. And as Anna Catherine was saying, like this place, like Calvary, is so interested in as a whole, doing some work around it. And so I'm excited and humbled.
So thank you as leaders, especially for signing on early and for doing the background work to prepare yourselves and then to be facilitators. And I'd love to hear from those of you who are participants what you thought you were signing up for, why you said yes to the invitation to join this group, what drew you into to be a part of this journey. Any of you?
So I can start there. I'm Buzz. My wife Sarah and I joined Sacred Ground at the beginning of it all, and she and I had somewhat of a unique experience, I think, among those participating in the group, which were that she and I joined this church only very recently, just last year, and hadn't had experiences in the Episcopal Church beforehand. So she and I both saw this small group experience as an opportunity to plug into a small group of people at the church and listen to their experiences and listen to what they had to say as individuals and as a community on an issue that is very important to us, and one that, in our experience, in other churches didn't receive as much attention as clearly it deserves. And so that was our, just to speak for her a little bit and for myself, our mindset going into it. And we both had a very challenging and rewarding few months with this group of people. We had sort of two different groups, a larger one and then I think a smaller one, and we were in the smaller group, which was a little daunting when you're talking about and dealing with such an important issue, because you have to really fess up a little bit. When there's only 5 or 6 people in the room in a given week, you really have to participate and invoke some challenging things that you might see in yourself. But that was a very rewarding experience, and I think it also exposed, in a way, the heart of this church and this group in a very specific way that we found very encouraging. So that was our experience.
I'm Mary Jane Vire, and if I'm very honest about it, I went into Sacred Ground thinking, I'm the least racist person I know, but I'll do this anyway. One reason, the service of reconciliation and remembrance sort of left me as not the same person that I was before. So I think that probably piqued my interest in Sacred Ground. But I found out so much about myself in this course. It seemed like every week, the readings and the videos made things clear. When last week, when one of our seniors says, you've got to, sometimes you have to experience something to really know it. And I think about that with some of the videos brought things home to me that I don't think just talking about it or reading about it would have had that sort of effect. But I also found out something about small groups at Calvary that I've known for years. These people, we sit in a room week after week with people, and they are the smartest, most caring, thoughtful. There is something to be learned from the people in the group, and I'm just so grateful to have been a part of it.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Bill Etnier. Been in Memphis about 3.5 years, and coming to Calvary about 3 years. And pretty much when I see something like this, I say, okay, I need to do that. It's like I need to do it. And I think for the moral reason, and also to get courage in places where people don't want to talk about these things or acknowledge the impact of racism in all its forms and all the consequences of it. You know, I've been in settings, well, we just don't talk about that here. And what's so strange to me is that at Calvary, it's like hardly a day goes by where I'm talking to somebody about racism and what this congregation is doing and so on. And as Mary Jane said and others said, just being with other people in this group, you say, oh my God, it's like I would have never thought that. And as everybody said, you know, we learned so much not only about the history of Black Americans in this country, but indigenous people, Asians, Mexican Americans who were, you know, in our country long before we said they weren't, and just a lot of stuff that I would have never known. And it's just such a shame that we know what's going on in the world today. Well, we just can't teach our kids this. I'll make them feel uncomfortable. Like, anyway, so it's quite an experience here to be with these folks. And really, as Buzz said, it's a nice way to kind of enter this community of people when you don't know too many people.
Matt Seltzer, and I was with, I guess, the larger rather than the smaller group. That's probably better for everybody else that was in the group. But I think honestly, I came to the group out of a sense of fear that whatever I thought I was doing that was right wasn't still right enough, and I was right. And even in retrospect, it's still not right. So my fears were confirmed, but they were confirmed by a lot of really interesting material and a lot of really great people. So I think, that's what I was interested because I was worried that I didn't know enough, and I think, again, my fears were confirmed in the best or worst possible way. And I was really fortunate to be there with a group of people that we were in the same room with. So it was super great and awful and great all at the same time.
So just before we'll get back over here to Scott in a minute, but I just wanted to clarify a few things because there have been some references made to, so there are two groups. We had a Sunday afternoon community that met kind of every other Sunday-ish. And then we had a Wednesday night group that again met staggered every other Wednesday night. Because there were people who wanted to participate who either had obligations to choir or work obligations or things like that. So we had these two opportunities for folks. So that ended up, when they were talking about the larger group and the smaller group, that was a lot about logistics and us making some opportunities available to folks that worked for them. And there were others who couldn't do either, and so stay tuned for more opportunities. As we continue to reflect, and this is probably impossible to ask of each of you, but to think about not the peak or the best or the hardest, or because that's a really tricky way to think about things, but a moment or a learning, whether that was something directly from the curriculum or a conversation that unfolded, knowing that those of us who are listening to you are not going to be able to get the whole thing because you can't give us the whole backstory and every detail about it, but just a glimpse into some of the specifics, a little, early on, midway through, toward the, whatever that is for you, knowing that it isn't the end-all be-all example, but just to give folks a sampling of like the types of aha moments or learnings or discussions that unfolded, if that makes sense. So it looks like, Shannon, you ended up with a microphone, so we'll let you start.
So one thing I'll say, Catherine, before we even do that is that, so the thing about Sacred Ground and the way it was designed for, and I'm going to say this and you're going to think it's weird, but I'm going to say it because it's important to know, that it was designed for white people. It was designed for white people to learn about people that are not white. And that part is hard in the beginning to like understand, like, why are there no people of color in this group? And it really is because what I've learned in society that we do many times is that we expect people of color to teach us about their history. And it's our history. And so that part was important for me to understand in the beginning that, I have to learn this. I don't have to have anybody else explain it to me. And then the part that stands out to me, it is, and maybe you all know this, but like when we talked about clergy in the Episcopal Church and in history, and there was one figure that stood out to me, and I think the number was 82% of clergy in the Diocese of Virginia owned enslaved people. 82% of clergy in the diocese. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. Like priests, like, and then beyond that, the idea that it's also a crazy thing to think about. But like when I think of slavery, like this, larger, history that we know of slavery, I think of plantations and large numbers of people that are enslaved. The part that was so eye-opening to me was when one article talked about that people owning individual people, like one person. And it said in the Virginia article, it said, like, many people owned one or two enslaved people. And it was like, I'd never in my life thought of the idea that, oh, like, you just had somebody that you owned, that came with you wherever you, it was like shocking. And then, it leads you down a path of like, oh, thinking about this place. I'm like looking at the names on the very back of Calvary, the people that founded Calvary, and thinking, oh, what year were they? Oh, they were before, like, they probably owned people. Like, that part was like, what do we do now? When Mary Jane talked about the service of reconciliation that happened here, I think in 2018, like, yeah, 2018. If you haven't seen it, it's online. It's a beautiful, like, service to just watch. But the idea that we needed to do something, and this sacred ground being kind of maybe the next step in naming some of that. So.
I had an aha moment early on. Not necessarily based on the curriculum, but I think that a lot of what we confront in sacred ground is fear. It's fear of the unknown. It's fear of not knowing the history. It's fear of saying the wrong thing. It's fear of doing the wrong thing. And our group built trust and community, I think, really, really quickly. And I had a moment in September where I just kind of broke. I'd lost a friend, a very dear friend, to violence, and I just sort of broke. And the love and compassion that the room showed to me at the moment was unexpected. I didn't expect it because I didn't know a lot of these people well. But also, I immediately knew that I was in the right place. I was in the right place to talk about fears that I didn't even know that I had until that moment happened. And it was just a really beautiful feeling. And I felt like that over and over at Calvary. The service of reconciliation and remembrance was life-changing for me. But that moment in September was also one of those Calvary moments for me that I won't ever forget, I think. And there were lots of moments for lots of people that happened over the course of many months like that. And it was just really beautiful to be walking alongside these folks and having those experiences with them. So not necessarily a curriculum aha moment, but just a really beautiful feeling.
I'll piggyback on that. First, how much I appreciated the way Anna Catherine and Elizabeth led, and I'm sure as Shannon and John did in the other, that there was this, in the way they approached it, and hopefully in the curriculum itself, there's a capacity for the leaders to both keep us moving and be vulnerable and present. And so that moment that Anna Catherine's describing also crystallized in that group for me, that this is a group that's, we can tell the truth about what's happening. And if you remember the year we went through, I think it was our second meeting, our phones were lighting up because somebody was driving around Memphis shooting people indiscriminately. Right? Yeah. That's like our second, we were in this room, in this building, we locked down the building, and we've just been starting to step into this deep, long story of especially how race-based chattel slavery is not just like everybody else's slavery, and started something in this country that still infects my heart, right? We learning that, not just learning the history as the facts, but like when we realized that we decided at a certain point that one class of people, indentured servants, you're dead and then you're dead. Well, we decided that the descendants of the people you owned, if you're black, the descendants also belong to your own. Some things that really started to tell the story in a way that this is a different kind of sickness. And so to walk through the year we went through with all that went on, it didn't give us easy answers. It was horrible, right? But to realize that so much of the hurt and the violence in Memphis that's alive today has a story. It has a family tree. So anyway, all of that trust and the way that it was led was really important. To hold those things and not give us a tidy, you can check this off, you've done your DEI. It's really much more an opening up of the self to kind of hopefully get a sense of where my motivations come from. Hopefully not just to know the story, but to say, you got to know that something in you, your fears, this is part of who you are. And so, anyway.
Participants, y'all want to share a moment that was...
I kind of wanted to touch on a related note. Scott relayed very well some of what I wanted to say. But personally, and I think a lot of people, but personally, I have a tendency to, whenever I know there's a problem, I try to skip to, well, okay, how do we fix it? What do we do? What do I need to do to fix this problem? And the curriculum and the way that we dissected that curriculum took a wildly different approach, which is uncomfortable on the outset, which was to get really into the nitty-gritty of the history of how we ended up in the awful circumstances that our country is in when it comes to racial issues and the racial divide. And so it wasn't an aha moment, but it was a series of moments where I stopped asking, okay, so what do we do? Okay, so what do we do? Like, okay, I think I get it now. Oh, no, I don't. There's an entire, we haven't even gotten to this. And that is, to get from there to, like what we've kind of touched on a little bit, getting to a place where you feel more comfortable saying, so what can we actually sit down and do now that we've gleaned over all of this information and still only probably scratched the surface, is a daunting thing. But the aha moments for me were once I realized the way that we tackle this issue is by educating ourselves and by educating each other. And then to read in the news in our state and many other states where we're trying to, or certain groups are trying to dilute the issue or muzzle the issue in educational settings, colored the conversation in a whole new light for me. And was just a continual reaffirmation that this is a constant issue and that education is the primary route, primary avenue for really having a meaningful discussion on some of these issues.
When Catherine mentioned aha moments or those sort of experiences, the first thing that popped into my mind was, and I think this is important to me because of my family's experience, the GI Bill saved my family. My parents bought our first house. Now, that was a long time ago. I won't do like Shannon and tell my age, but it was a long time ago. And my father barely served in the Army. He was too young to have been sent overseas. But we took advantage of it. And I was so horrified to learn that the GI Bill may have been available to black soldiers, but how are they going to go to college? The colleges wouldn't allow them to attend. There are all these examples of white privilege that I never thought about. And that's just one example that maybe, like I said, hit me hard because my family, I believe my family survived because of it. So all sorts of things like that just never crossed my mind. And I'm glad they cross my mind every day now. So.
I can't, nothing pops out in my mind as this was the aha experience, but I think there were many. And one, if you wouldn't mind showing that book of Growing Up White, or Waking Up White. So the lady who wrote this book, she started going into her own education somewhere in the late 90s. Maybe midnight. She finally writes this book about 3 years ago. And it just struck me how it's just such a long journey. And that I think that just is what keeps hitting me. That and it's just hard. Many times people would say, oh man, that reading was hard. And well, yeah, it should be hard. So I think another thing I think that was important in my learning is that I work in a setting where I can have some influence, and being in this group many times has kind of given me the courage, no, we're moving ahead with this. We have to address the consequences and see in what ways we're not doing what we could be doing. And so it's just that is a continual reminder of having this kind of support.
I'll be as quick as possible. I mean, there were a litany, a manifold of strange things that happened with either the group or with the material and us in terms of experiencing different things where something gets uncovered in a way, but mine was unexpected because the one of the things that I didn't think that we'd cover, but somewhere later, I don't know, later, there's this point in which there are a couple of things that are readings where it doesn't necessarily have to do with racism per se, but there's a series, one particular session where it talks about why people can't talk about things. And one of the reasons that becomes uncovered is because people like me think that the reason that I can't, that everyone else is a racist or whatever else is because they're dumb. And so, like, I'm a smart liberal person, and the fact that I'm a smart liberal person and know more than someone else actually creates this barrier between me and them. And so it hit me to the core where, like, all of these things that you think, you're actually, like, trying to, in your mind, you're building a case about why you should do things, and because you should do these things, it makes you better than someone else. And it's like, that was the moment where I realized, oh, it's not even about race, it's about the fact that I'm an idiot, and that I'm creating the barriers that I'm worried about as I try to do this. And so in order to have a productive conversation, I need to realize that not only am I a part of the problem, but my thinking about the problem in a particular way compounds the problem and is not very caring and loving, et cetera, to be able to engage someone at that level. So it was big for me.
I'm going to let Elizabeth share, and then I'm going to ask y'all if you have questions or things to be ready.
I totally agree with you, and that's what I was going to say myself, is that I was really proud of being liberal, and that it got shot down, and that was needed, and I appreciated that.
Yeah. Oh.
Just share that Matt shared a very poignant story of, Matt in the group shared a very poignant story of what he's talking about here. So it was really, where you had to, what do you call it, where the rubber meets the road, and kind of live what you were talking about. And there are so many of as people are speaking, I sort of am remembering what those moments were.
So those of you who are listening in and getting a glimpse of this, both the curriculum that we keep referring to, but also the experiences, your own questions or your own observations, anybody have something that you want to ask these folks about the journey that they've been on? Yeah, Kate.
I was sitting here thinking that I, frankly, have always thought of myself as a racist. And people who know me say, "You, a racist?" And I have many friends who are African American. But my general view, especially since we've been living in Memphis, is that I'm very judgmental. Whenever I see people just crosswalking in the middle of the street, I question, what's that all about? Every time I hear about a shooting, what's this family dynamic? And it's painful for me to acknowledge this, but I'm wondering, after you've been through this whole program, have you felt yourself being changed? Can you look at your surroundings and the community and people that you don't know and feel differently about them?
So thank you for saying that. And I don't know how long ago when I realized that I'm a white supremacist and a racist, because I'm aware of my prejudicial ideas and thoughts, and there you go again. So, not a day would go by without noticing one of those kind of thoughts about somebody who doesn't look just like me. And so, I don't know exactly where to go with that, but I guess the piece that, and I remember being in this, this was a seminar like 20-some years ago when I was first starting to teach, and we went to this indigenous setting where they talked all about this, and he didn't know my name, but he says, and Bill there, but he didn't know me at all. He just used that name. And he grew up in this environment, and, we understand that he breathed this whatever racist air, and we don't hate him for it, but how could I or he not come out this way? And so I think in this place where we could just share this, it's just being able to acknowledge it and then not act on it in a bad way, although sometimes we do.
Being the clergy in there, trying not to talk too much in class, I was surprised how often I came back. I think Episcopalians for a while, people say we don't like to talk about sin, we don't like to talk about, we say everybody's deeply good. We don't want to talk about old ideas of like original sin and those. I mean, we got that really wrong. Don't get me wrong. We messed up original sin in a lot of ways. But what this changed for me and really brought home is, like, Kate, you're being truthful about the way that I didn't get all better. And the way that we understand sin as something not just waking up on a Tuesday and deciding to knock over the gas station over here, and that's not what sin, that's not how it works, right? It go way upstream. What are the experiences that cause me to want the things I want? Why do I say the things I say? My friends in recovery really help me understand that the real work to be done is not just to say, what should I do right now? But for the long haul, how does a community acknowledge that I have this part of myself that will always be broken? And how do I mitigate the damage? And that doesn't sound like good news. Like the rest of my life, I'm going to be mitigating the damage of the wrong ways I've been shaped to understand who I am in the world. But I do think the church has something to offer that, because that's kind of mitigating damage is about the best we can hope to do. Our confession, we say these things. So that was something that I took away, more than just saying, oh, I got this. I see things and I realize I'm always going to be damaged. But a community can help me see that and can help me protect people that will be hurt by my damaged self.
So there's this part about doing this work that invoked in me shame. a feeling, like a real, like, oh gosh, like how could I? And thank you for saying that about yourself, about like having those feelings of like, oh gosh. And then like, what do you do? Like, what do you think? Okay, well, just the acknowledgement of that is like so important, of like my own feelings. So like walk into a room or walk down the street or like, and I didn't used to notice the feeling. I used to just like, that's just how things are. And through Sacred Ground and lots of other things in my life, like the ability to pause and go, oh, that's a feeling. Like, why do I have that feeling about? And then, like, the what to do about it. I think that is the what to do about it. Like, the acknowledging it in myself and going, oh, that's kind of like, that's probably racism or sexism or, an ism that I need to, like, it just, the slow work of that, of realizing it, of like going, oh, helps change me, and hopefully helps change me. And it's not like I don't leave here thinking I have answers. I mean, I don't know if any of you all, like, I don't have answers, but I certainly left here feeling like I could better connect with the ideas within Sacred Ground, like just to be able to go, oh, that, yeah, I get that. And, not just for Black people, but Asian people, Native people. The amount of information that there still is to learn out there could fill up 17 Sacred Ground groups. And so the idea of just kind of scratching and going a little deeper into, my own stuff is what's helped.
Another question from the room? Anybody have something you're wondering about? Yeah, Madge. Nope, you have to talk to the microphone.
Will there be future offerings of the class?
Yes. Great question. Which actually is not only will we talk about that, but I would love for you guys to talk about. So this is hard. We can feel that in your responses. And why would you say, do the hard work? Let's do more of this. What would you say to somebody who's out there thinking, I kind of maybe, but I don't know. Should I? This is a whole thing.
I would say definitely yes. And we who have been doing it, we're happy to help other groups start. And I want to tell you, as a teacher, when I got involved in this, I knew there was a curriculum, but I hadn't looked at it. When I looked at this, it's amazing.
That's the book.
And this isn't even, when I realized how much it was, I stopped printing. I was, oh no. This is top quality planning on the part of saints in the Episcopal Church who put this together. It is amazing. So if you feel called to facilitate a group, the work is done. It is done, and the assignments are made, and it's there for you and easy. Well, the work isn't easy, but the curriculum part is beautiful and is already done for you and is waiting for you.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I would just highly, highly encourage you to carve out the time to do it. Everyone's busy. I think everyone in our group is busy. It was so worth the time away from families, away from work, away from everything that we took time away from to learn about these really challenging pieces of history and how they still impact us today. And I can't encourage you all enough to take advantage of future sessions and facilitate sessions if that's your jam. But it was one of the most meaningful things that I've done.
I would just add that everyone up here joined this group for, I think, probably close to the same reason that most of you thought this would be a good thing to come to, which is that you know that this is a real problem in our city, in our church and country, and I've certainly had the thought, well, I'm not going to fix racism. But institutional change and widespread mindset change, which brings about societal change over a very long time, starts with individual decisions and individual choices to learn and grow. And this, for me, was a small step in that direction. The first of hopefully many for me, and I think that would be echoed by the others on this stage. But if you have any interest at all in making that kind of step or learning those kinds of things, broadening your base of knowledge, this is a truly very, very good way to do that, in my experience.
If y'all want to.
I don't want this to stop, and we decided we're going to continue somehow, because I think it's great we did this 11 weeks, but it's not enough. We got to keep going, and the more people that kind of are interested, that it creates a force, right?
I think I think what we all learned, is that the circles, the groups are the right scale to approach the material, and the material it's laid out for you. It couldn't be any easier to do it. It's a difficult thing, but the hard part has been, I think, done in terms of a curriculum. So I think if you've ever been to a book club, if you've ever been to a Wednesday night class, if you've ever been to a group of people that meet regularly, and you understand both what's going on inside that group and the topic at hand, this is one of those times where if you're thinking maybe I should, the answer is you should.
And just to reiterate that, what I would say to somebody who's thinking about it is, we, like Buzz said, we probably come with individual responses, and we end up in a group, and we're not alone. And the potential, not good news, in dealing with this hard stuff as systemic, is that it's in all of us. Like, maybe you walk in and you carry a picture of what those racists are like, and we have a caricature that lifts me off the hook. That's the good liberal thing, I think. So that's the bad news, that it's embedded in everything we do and how we spend our money and how we. But the good news is you find this group of people that are truthful and vulnerable and embedded in the long-term Christian community. That's where you want to do this kind of work, right? You want to do it in a relationship. You want to be challenged by people who aren't just you and your own, whether it's your shame or your justifying kind of mind that likes to tell me I'm just fine. I think the community effort, the circles, like Matt said, are just essential to why you might want to do it.
And just to add, as an onlooker and a cheerleader from the scenes, and I think Shannon said at the midpoint, to acknowledge that I'm a white person, and I belong to a lot of predominantly white institutions, and Calvary is chief among them. And so this work is personal for each one of these people, and as Scott said, then there's a group, and the scale of the group, and the intimacy, and the trust that builds, and then there's what it means for Calvary, and how Calvary begins to see itself. And again, we've referenced some of the big, deep work that Calvary has done, which starts with just frankly staying here in downtown, and includes the service of the litany of remembrance, and includes these sacred ground groups, and includes our everyday encounters and our individual kind of journeys. And so there's just a lot of layers to what it means for us as particular people, myself, my history, my story that I need to own, and my place in this community, and my community being Calvary, my community being Memphis, my community being America, all of these things. So I do think that there's, it might be for you, and it might be also for us, really significant and important. And to that end, there will be Sacred Ground Circles starting probably toward the end of the summer and the fall, again, kind of following that school year rhythm a little bit, but knowing that the shape of this particular work doesn't kind of fit quite as neatly into some of our boxes that we're used to using. So stay tuned and look out for information about that. And if you have particular interest, talk to these people, talk to me. We'd love to start building that kind of core group that then we can say we've got facilitators and we're ready to launch. So that's a little bit of the logistics. But I don't want to be the last speaker because this wasn't my experience. Somebody else want to say something to send us out into the world? Another question? Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. So I was hoping if y'all feel or have the word to talk about how you view the difference between not being racist versus anti-racism, and how do you define it? This is not the black test, coming up. So I was debating even asking the question because I was like, oh no, I can imagine sitting up there and I would be nervous. But yeah, if you'd like to share that. And a question about Sacred Ground as a follow-up is, would you say Sacred Ground is a place for people who want to do the work who aren't Episcopalian? Is it a place that for other non-believers maybe to attend in order just to get the work done?
So there's a book called How to Be an Anti-Racist that I'm sure you probably know about that I've read. And this idea of, it's an interesting idea of allyship versus advocacy. And we talk a lot about like allyship, about being an ally to the black community or the gay community, and from moving from ally to advocate is a big step, and it's a hard step. And your idea about being an anti-racist, I mean, to me, that idea of continuing to push, not just being in the background and being somebody who leads a Sacred Ground group or takes a Sacred Ground class, but that actually like moves forward with something. And as Buzz said in the beginning, like, what is that something? I'm just like that. I want to know, like, what can I do right now that can fix it? And it's not. It's a slow path of uncovering. I can remember being a kid in this city and hearing somebody in my church that I grew up in say to somebody else about their neighborhood. They said these words: the neighborhood is turning. And I, as a 12-year-old, knew what that meant, but I didn't know it was bad. Like, I didn't know that, like, oh, that's a horrible thing to say, but I understood what it meant. And like the idea of, from 12 to, sometime around when I was 50, like kind of learning about what that meant and where that came from and then what to do. And I think, becoming an anti-racist is really just being okay having a conversation about that kind of thing, about what we grew up with, about what I grew up with in this country.
I think, too, to piggyback on what Shannon said, it's thinking beyond yourself and thinking about the structures like Mary Jane mentioned in her story. It's thinking about the systemic structures that continue to perpetuate these long-standing issues that our country is facing. It's thinking more about those. It's being more aware. It's thinking about how we can change them, how that works, how we raise our children to change them, because I think, frankly, I don't have a lot of hope right now for my age group, but I'm hoping that our kids can really step up. So I think it's thinking bigger than just, am I a racist? Yes. But what can I do with that knowledge, knowing that I am? How do I think differently about myself and think differently about the world around me with that awareness?
To follow up on the less challenging of your two questions, in a way, which is, should non-Episcopalians would this be applicable to them? Should they seek? I wasn't an Episcopalian until like August, so. That being said, the experience of white privilege is universal to white people. The participation in a systemically discriminatory society is universal to white people. And so I didn't, my wife and I didn't approach this as Episcopalians. We approached this as Christians, yes, but participants in that society, and people who want to see that society change. So yeah, I would definitely advocate non-Episcopalians, non-church members to seek out these kinds of experiences.
Let's see. I'd just like to build off. Well, first, of course, anybody should come, right? And can come. But Scott just mentioned the idea that, you know, he's broken, I'm broken, we recognize we're broken. And so I don't think, I don't even know if what scale would be how racist you are or not. Personally, I think that's kind of irrelevant and boring. And kind of self-centered, because you just, okay, I don't need to know I'm a 1 or a 10 or a 5 on the personally racist scale. It's more like what everybody's saying is, how does that show up in the way I live my life, or we live our life, or systems and structures do. So it's kind of like, get on with it, right? You know?
So obviously the conversation could go on and on and on, and the curriculum is dense and amazing, and this is just a glimpse into it, and it's also 10:16. So more to come, more to come, more to come, and talk to these folks and reach out if you're interested in more, and thank you all. Thank you. And thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.